Hello, my name is Haley Benjamin, and welcome to my TED Talk. For the last 2 months, I've been doing research on a topic that you all know I am very passionate about: sports. Specifically the issue of stigma, pressure, and mental health in sports, thus prompting my research question. How do the pressures athletes face impact their mental health and ultimately their performance? As a part of better understanding this topic, I'm going to start by setting a scene. This picture was taken back in August, and nearly 24 hours before this picture was taken, this girl, who you all know, was sitting on the bathroom floor of her hotel room, crying while trying over and over to force herself to puke up what she had eaten for dinner that night before her roommate got there. As ridiculous as it may sound, she was so terrified that her training from the entire season would be compromised, all because she'd chosen to take 2 days off for a recruiting trip, and she felt as if she had eaten too much that night. What's even more ridiculous sounding is that she was afraid she wouldn't be able to practice the way she wanted. She was afraid of feeling inadequate and, ultimately not being able to reach her own goals. In the most general sense, she was afraid her own body would betray itself. Unfortunately, I can't say that was the first and only time something like that happened. Little did she know at the time, but it was the first of many attempts similar to this one. About 5, to be exact. In that moment, she felt the immense weight and pressure on her shoulders to bring her top-level performance to the table all the time, every day, without fail. She knew something was wrong, but she wasn't sure how to fix it. She was embarrassed, and she was afraid to even face it. I tell that very revealing story not because I'm trying to get you to feel bad for me or take pity on my situation, but because eating disorders in any athlete, big or small, are only a microscopic piece of the puzzle that makes up a world of vicious mental disorders that stem from pressure in the world of athletics. According to the National Alliance on Mental Health, nearly 43.8 million Americans are suffering from a mental disorder. With the intense physical and emotional demands athletes of all levels are placed under, they become susceptible to these disorders as well due to their specific circumstances. In this world, the magnification and cultural idealization of sports that comes from the media, coaches, and even the athletes themselves puts the athletes' mental health at risk and their performance as well. Sorry for the stock photos, by the way. But there is a stigma around this issue that makes it nearly impossible for it to be talked about, because mention of mental pain are not only seen as failures on behalf of the athlete, but on behalf of the person as well. In many ways, this stigma inhibits effective dialogue, education, and development of resources. This issue of stigma leads to both the epidemic of delayed diagnosis and inadequate resources for athletes who have been fortunate enough to identify their disorder. Commonly, mental disorders are brought upon by sport-specific physical and emotional demands, therefore needing special qualification to address these challenges and help fix them. Typically, many institutions, specifically college-level institutions, have sports medicine physicians, dietitians, and physical trainers readily available for athletes. However, very few employ full-time, even part-time licensed psychologists. They typically rely on campus counselors who just don't have the training to address student-athlete specific psychological needs. Generally, those who do wish to become licensed sports psychologists need experience with team dynamics and team environments, as well as previous high-level athletic experience and coaching experience themselves. With high pressure to demonstrate exemplary performance, athletes may find very little to even no time to visit any counselor who is available. Although the specifics of high-pressure situations may vary, they share 3 common attributes. The outcome is important to the athlete, the outcome is uncertain to the athlete, and for many obvious reasons, the athlete feels responsible for the outcome. With the intense pressure and long hours athletes face as a part of their ever-changing training plans, it can create very severe emotional responses. Since athletes are generally considered high-performing machines in all aspects of life, it can be hard to identify when they are under significant stress. As a part of my research, I read portions of this book, Performing Under Pressure: The Science of Doing Your Best When It Matters Most. And while I was reading, I came across something that helped me to identify how pressure affects athletes on a deeper physical level: the role of cortisol. Cortisol alters your ability to retrieve both working and procedural memory. Working memory affects one's judgment, their ability to analyze data, and how well they recall crucial information for decision making. Procedural memory affects one's ability to perform tasks they have already mastered and actions that are already memorized. Cortisol, in combination with something called the corticotropin-releasing hormone, also known as CRH, entices anxiety, commonly called anticipatory anxiety, and suppresses the production of testosterone. In the absence of testosterone, approach-based behavior diminishes and our attention becomes naturally, selectively focused on the negative aspects of a situation. This causes athletes to see situations as something as dangerous or threatening, rather than something they can be challenged by in a healthy way. Since attention during these moments becomes narrowed, athletes may experience higher levels of self-doubt, interfering with their ability to perform despite the fact that they may be more than physically ready. Other than causing athletes to choke in performance situations, the pressures that athletes face can come with other unfortunate consequences, those being mental disorders. For the main part of my research, I looked into 3 of the most common mental disorders seen in sports, those being overtraining syndrome, eating disorders such as anorexia athletica, and anxiety, specifically somatic anxiety. I was passionate about studying these mental disorders so that I could eventually be able to put a name to the things that I was feeling and experiencing in my own life, and be able to conceptualize them in a way that I could understand. That way, maybe one day I could be able to help athletes in not only my community, but in your community as well. Grasping how these mental disorders intertwine with pressure is key to then understand how athletes can combat them in effective ways. Anorexia athletica can be defined as an eating disorder in which an athlete must feel a sense of control over their body. They achieve low weight through compulsive exercise and measuring their self-worth through level of success in their sport, rather than being totally focused on self-image, as most eating disorders are. Sometimes those affected by this will exercise when they are not able to, when they are injured, sick, or even told not to exercise, and they will experience extreme feelings of guilt and frustration when they cannot. Sports classified as athletic sports, such as gymnastics, diving, cycling, extreme, and figure skating, are those of athletes more likely to be affected by anorexia athletica. This is because sports like this put an emphasis on looking good while maintaining lower body weight, which leads to higher performance. Athletes with anorexia athletica may show very low energy availability, reduced aerobic capacity, and muscle strength and volume, as the athletes will often go through periods of food restriction, food binging, even self-induced vomiting. It can be hard for their bodies to become accustomed to a routine, so to speak. This is what makes an eating disorder like this so hard to diagnose, because athletes do not typically fit the regular physical diagnostic criteria. The desire for control that so many athletes wish to hold over their body can lead to overtraining syndrome in conjunction with anxiety. Overtraining syndrome is the imbalance in this simple equation: training equals workout plus recovery. Now, as I can probably guess, almost everyone in here, if not everyone I would hope, has worked out at some point in their life. The typical and desired effects of working out are to gain fitness and improve health, among other things. And in the most general sense, this is similar to what athletes would like to get from working out. Athletes train to perfect their performance. The race to reach optimal performance comes through an increase in training loads and intensity. However, when these training loads cannot be matched with an equal amount of recovery, overtraining syndrome can become a very dangerous reality. A reality affecting up to 60% of elite athletes and resulting in a 10% burnout rate. A reality that often goes unnoticed because athletes view these increase in training loads as something to be normal or expected, so for them it can be hard to identify when they are under stress. According to the National Center for Biotechnology Information, it is predicted that overtraining syndrome is caused by systematic inflammation and subsequent effects on the central nervous system, including depressed mood, central fatigue, and resultant neurohormonal changes. When overtraining reaches extreme levels in combination with additional stressors, say like pressure to do well coming from sources, social sources, it can invoke feelings of inadequacy and fear of rejection that can cause that choke that I mentioned before. when an athlete wants to do well but delivers performance below what they are capable of. As a part of understanding overtraining syndrome, I interviewed Catherine Ross, a professional distance runner and triathlete here in Durango. She told me about her experience with this, describing to me that she developed many damaging habits combined with constant overtraining, creating further mental stress from eventual decreased performance that began from her senior year of high school all the way until she completely quit triathlons at age 22. She told me that she missed out on a lot of her own life because she was afraid that training would interfere. She didn't go on vacations with her family or outings with friends or any sort of, social activity. Because athletes, like Catherine, can often develop a strong sense of identity through their sports and competing in them for often several years, when athletic performance is taken away, nervousness, low self-esteem, and somatic anxiety can appear to the stress of the situation of not being able to partake in sports. Since the term somatic refers to the body, when athletes develop somatic anxiety, they can experience headaches, stomach aches, and increased heart rate. Based off this, it can be interpreted that stresses to perform well and anxiety that comes with it can create very unhealthy environments for the growing athlete. In one way or another, this anxiety disrupts your performance system. In a pressure-filled competition moment, if an athlete's heart rate starts to zoom, their thinking is apt to become rigid and distorted. Similar to this, if they perceive that their survival, so to speak, is based off of the outcome of the pressure moment, they're apt to simulate anxiety and fear that in turn make the moment even more threatening. Now, I understand that I have just thrown a lot of information at you regarding this issue, and unfortunately there is no one-size-fits-all solution to this problem or how we can fix it, which brings me to the final aspect of my research, a potential solution. While unfortunately I cannot have any say over the help that professional institutes currently offer for athletes, through my research I aim to acquire knowledge as to how athletes can personally help themselves overcome these dangerous effects through practice of something called pressure solutions. Pressure solutions help by reducing feelings of anxiety, stress, fear, and embarrassment, avoiding distraction, regulating arousal, guiding behavior, and helping the athlete focus on what helps them. Pressure solutions can influence how an athlete thinks about these moments, direct their focus, begin guiding them into specific mental imagery, and depressurize themselves on a psychological level. By using emotion regulation, they can choose how to act in certain situations, focusing on previous successes to affirm their confidence, thriving on the challenge of the moment to see how far they can push themselves, and in some sense, tricking themselves into feeling certain emotions to fit situational demands. Befriending the moment can be an athlete's most reliable strategy. When an athlete takes control of their cognitive tendencies and general expressions, they construct a byproduct of success through meeting their own challenges. When your body feels naturally challenged, it releases more adrenaline than noradrenaline, which means the smooth muscles in your blood vessels dilate, your lungs dilate, more oxygenated blood travels to tissue that needs it, and you have more energy for clearer thinking. By using these tools, nervousness can be transformed into a positive pressure solution for every passionate athlete, helping even the most prepared navigate these tough situations. I leave you with this quote: "You don't need to heap pressure on yourself, because it can make you close down and shrivel up. You stay open, you stay calm, you trust all the work you did, and that will make you free." The bottom line is that mental health is not only a matter of physical safety, but mental safety as well, which is why I put such an emphasis on this topic being further discussed and recognized, as it can be a detriment to physical performance and long-term mental health. As a society, we must be patient with the athlete, patient in their ability to handle high levels of somatic and mental stress from the pressure that so many other athletes like them are put under every day, and patient with their ability to deal with the consequences of these mental disorders. Although there are certain remedial actions athletes can use as self-help, such as the pressure solutions that I mentioned, more research is to be done in this area to ensure that there are adequate resources for athletes. They may set the bar for their own success, but struggling in silence only increases the emotional pressure and strain they face every day. So the next time I get to take a picture like this, surrounded by people that I love, and the next time I get to smile that big, I want to mean it, and I don't want to feel like I have anything to hide. And reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness, but only proves strength within. Thank you.